A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend. ChristiTutionalist Joseph M. Leonard.
Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP, in association with TheLibertyBeacon.com, and I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Leonard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show! I go, okay. Skype just hiccuped. I hope we're okay. Welcome to another show of ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast. Joining me from the WAAM radio studios is my friend Derek Stone. Hey, Derek, how are you?
I'm doing great, Joe. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. We came over to Skype because we were having Zoom issues. So if things look different, if you're looking behind the scenes video, that's why we're using Skype now instead. And I was on Ed Bondarenka's show, I think it was the 16th of November, talking We the People Demand List, my quasi-new contract with America. I later wrote Contract from America. I just found out the other day also somebody else also wrote a Contract from America, so people probably remember his, not mine. But now I've got We the People Demand List, and I was hoping you'd get a chance to chime in while I was talking with Ed, but you didn't. So I wanted to bring you in for part two so you could add your 2 cents to the discussion. But before we do that, I called into your Stone Cold Sports Truth, which people can hear you Sunday, noon 30 on whamradio.com. You can go there. There's a listen live or tune in radio or iHeartRadio. You can find Wham Radio. And, we got to make you more international or at least national. You need to tell Theron to cough up for an 800 number for out-of-staters to call in for you.
Yeah, that certainly would be nice. But, yeah, it's tough competing in sports talk radio, especially since I'm only a stone's throw away from Detroit, and that's the big market here in the state of Michigan. And I am based in Ann Arbor. Obviously, you got University of Michigan football, men's basketball, and hockey, too. They've got a strong following, and there are other sports that are pretty good at the U of M, but I mainly focus on football and men's basketball for U of M, and obviously I focus on Detroit sports as well, but it's tough competing, especially when I'm on a conservative talk radio. If there's going to be a huge number of people who are interested in sports like I am. So that's certainly something that I have to deal with too.
Yeah, and you had to correct me twice on your show today. Normally I have my you-know-what together when I call in, but I was meaning to refer to the Oakland Raiders, but I called them the LA Raiders. You had to correct me. But we were talking about the old Oakland Raiders under Davis. And also the other one, I misunderstood what Jameson Williams was fined for. And after you corrected me, I kind of agree with the fine because there are, kids watching TV. We don't need that on the TV.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly was in poor taste, his crotch grab on his touchdown celebration. He should have just dove into the end zone or just ran in, crossed the goal line. And if he wanted to do a team celebration or something tasteful by himself, then so be it. Go ahead and do that. You don't need to be vulgar with your celebrations when you have younger kids watching. They can be impressionable or trying to create more sportsmanship in pro sports. And that's something that certainly seems to be lost a little bit. It seems to be that it always seems to be about trash talking and just wanting to get in each other's faces. But yeah, I know it's the heat of the battle. Football is a very emotional game, obviously, but you've got to be able to walk that fine line, knowing when to celebrate tastefully, and then being able to say and to applaud the opposing player if they make a good play on you. Give them their props. This is what competition is all about. You've got to be able to say, great job, whoever it is, and then you got to be able to shake on it after the game and in the post game, no matter who wins or loses. You just have to be cordial and win when you win or you lose.
Yeah, and then the other thing is like injuries. And I want our best playing against their best. And indeed, if they best us on that day, well, applause, hats off to you. Good job, well done. And I hope I'll be able to have you back in the new year 2025 to talk sports entirely, and whether we're finally past the Ford ownership curse, as I've been calling it, and indeed a new age for the Lions. But indeed, at any rate, that's not what you're here for today. Do you remember anything that sparked during my discussion with Ed, which will have aired now as a part 1 for my show on the We the People Demand List talk? You're here for a part 2. Do you remember anything that piqued your interest or some? I know Ed was most concerned about CCW reciprocity, and I said I want complete constitutional carry. And was there anything in the discussion, or what's most atop your mind of what your expectations are out of the Congress going into 2025?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to see much lower taxes. We are taxed up the yin-yang, especially here in Michigan. We've got the highest auto insurance rates in the country, if I'm not mistaken, or if not one of the highest. And property taxes are out of control, and income taxes, medical taxes, they're all way too high. And I would like to see much lower costs or elimination of a majority of these taxes.
Yeah, I'm with you. One of the items, I don't have it handy what number it is, and the official petition is at change.org, and there's only 20 items in there, but the Before It's News article piece on We the People Demand List is up to 49 items now. And one of the items is indeed tax reductions across the board. Property tax, a big issue with me. I've mentioned it. Too many seniors, the way I see it, supposedly own their home, but no, you're still renting it from the government via your property taxes. And if you don't pay it, they will confiscate the property you rightly own and outright bought. But I fear property taxes is more a states' rights issue or problem, but I'd like to see Congress say something officially on the record about the need to lower those so seniors aren't kicked out of their homes after living their whole life there, supposedly own it, but can't afford the property taxes. I take it that's something you agree with then.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And and Thay Roan, he's the host of On the Edge here on WAAM Radio weekdays from 3 to 6. He always vehemently says, try not paying your property taxes and see if you still own your property. And if you stop paying them, the government will come in and seize it. So that's certainly something that needs to be eliminated. Because if this is the home of the free, is what we prided ourselves on since the U.S. began back in 1776, to being able to have private property ownership. And when our country was first started, in elections, only landowners could vote. And now you've got so many people of all ages wanting to voting now. You've got kids who are 18, maybe going into college, voting, don't really know a whole lot about the workings in and outs of what goes on in the world. And you've got maybe some other people who are mooching off their parents still in their 20s and 30s who still vote but don't know what it means to own their own property. So I think that certainly is the property tax certainly needs to be eliminated because we are supposed to be a free society.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a little history for people in the audience. Yeah, the landowner thing or property ownership thing, it wasn't, oh my God, the male patriarchy. There were women who owned property and could vote before the amendment that gave all women the right to vote, whether landowners or not. And obviously, if they were in, I think it, well, I don't want to go back to then, but the whole point is, as you laid out, a vested interest. When the mobocracy, as we've turned into, can then say, okay, I'm going to tax you to give me that, that's an issue. And that's the issue, a whole aside from the property ownership thing, the vested interest in it as opposed to communistic theft and redistribution.
Right, yeah, and that basically kind of relates to taxation without representation, which our forefathers and early citizens of the U.S. fought against in the late 1700s. And obviously that you don't want the government wasting your money. That's what basically what it means. They're using it, they're robbing us to pay off, in this case, in the U.S., with the U.S. government today, paying off Ukraine for their unnecessary war with Russia.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. It's not like Ukraine invaded Russia, however, but yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and that other shows on Maverick News the other day. They aren't NATO, but Clinton and the Budapest Agreement, even Russia agreed to. They give up their nukes. Russia would never invade them again because 100 years history, most of Ukraine has been under Russian tyranny. But again, yes, that's all an aside. Whole other waste, fraud, and abuse of our monies right here at home too, obviously. But the point being, taxation without representation. We have the representation. However, a whole other people are overrepresented above us.
Right. Yeah. And too many members of Congress are getting rich off of being in government, which was not the intended, which was not supposed to be what government was about when the U.S. first started. You were supposed to maybe serve 2 terms, whether it be in the House of Representatives or in the Senate or as president or in any form of local government, and then you go back and work your regular job. That's what it was supposed to be like. And you got too many rhinos and obviously progressives on the Democrat side, like Mitt Romney, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, the current so-called president, Kamala Harris. I mean, we could go on all day.
Yeah.
It's pretty much 90, I would say at least 95% of Congress that they've put their snouts in the trough of the American people, robbing us of our tax money to basically just fill their own coffers.
Yeah, I just saw on social media the other day somebody posting about Debbie What's-Her-Face Schultz. It's Wasserman, but I call her What's-Her-Face. Debbie What's-Her-Face Schultz on Security Committee, investing in a company, new weapons lines. Well, gee, again, insider trading. Right? They know what's coming down the pike. They invest in the companies who are going to benefit from our stolen tax revenue, then handed over to those companies for whatever, and they benefit. So indeed, one of the items, and I wrote on thelibertybeacon.com about this, I think it was last year, an article. I agree with a Democrat, kind of, sort of. John Ossoff, or I call him John Lafayette Ossoff, that got in Senate for to fill a remainder of a term for 2 years. He put forth the Stock Act, mainly because of Piglosi and the crew. But you're right, CINOs, rhinos, as well as the commie-fasci sociocrats, as I call them, enriching themselves with insider information. And that's in the We the People demand list. Gotta pass. It's got to be in blind trust. They can't have any say whatsoever over what's going on in their investments, or they're enriching themselves, as you pointed out. So you're familiar with the Stock Act?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. Well, I forget what STOCK as an acronym, but of course, stock as in the stock market, right? So they can't, like a Debbie Wasserface Schultz, move her money into Company A because Company A is about to get a windfall from the federal government, and their stock will, of course, take off. The insider trading, right? What Martha Stewart seemingly innocently went to prison for. They threw the book at her, poor Martha. But they're doing it in D.C. every day.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, and I hope the new president-elect Donald Trump gets rid of all of this corruption, or can at least put a huge dent in it, for one thing, because it's been going on way too long. And unfortunately, this all started basically Woodrow Wilson back in the 1910s. He started this progressive leaning in U.S. politics, and it's becoming little by little. It's been accruing in the U.S. And then Barack Obama, when he became president, I still believe he's not a U.S. citizen by any means. I think he's Kenyan born. And when he became president, he talked about hope and change. That was a bait and switch tactic, obviously.
Dodge, deflection.
Yep. And then he had all this divisiveness happened in the U.S., saying the black people saying that white people are racist, and there was just divisions now between the Republicans and Democrats when it used to be they could get along and they could disagree we'll say pre-1960, pre-1963, before the Vietnam War, when the hippies started invading college campuses and started infiltrating into U.S. government and getting us in the position we are in today. And
Bill Ayers, whether underground terrorists,
yeah.
Who launched Obama? I call him Mao, Obama, Obamao, because he's more a Maoist than a Marxist. But yeah, his political career was launched at the home of Bill Ayers, the convicted and served time terrorist. And indeed, Wilson started this whole notion of, hey, we can buy votes. And the left has perfected that.
Yeah, and it's been prevalent with the way the elections have been conducted in Democrat-run states. I mean, look at California. They're still counting votes, I believe, to this day, nearly 3 weeks after the election. And Arizona was still counting votes until, I think, just a couple of days ago. If not, they're still counting. And New York, I think that, I'm not sure what they were like, but I'm sure they were done pretty quickly. But still, you got to be wary of any Democrat-run state, even if they're not as prevalent in the national scene, because even though California is not a swing state, I mean, there's a huge infiltration of illegal aliens that come into California from Mexico. And California used to be the bastion of conservatism. When Ronald Reagan was governor back in the 1960s, I believe it was, and it was pretty much conservative until Arnold Schwarzenegger, the famous actor, became governor. He was promoting conservatism, but he really just seemed more like a rhino from what I remember. And then Democrats just started infiltrating the California government, and now it's just a whole mess now with Gavin Newsom there. And I think there is a huge support for Donald Trump out in California, but because of all the Democrats, they like to pull out cheating operations. I'm not saying Republicans don't do the same, but it's more prevalent with the Democrats that there's a lot more cheating with their elections.
Yeah, Gavin Grewscum, as I call him. I mean, California, Trump did win the popular vote, and a lot of that was New York State and California votes. Not enough to win those states, but he moved both those states by like 20 points from the left back towards the center, at least, if not to the right. And just for the record, we are recording November the 24th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving, brother, and Merry Christmas and all that stuff. But I say that because the show will air in December, just to give context to kind of what we talked about. Yes, they're literally, as of today, Sunday, November 24th, still counting votes. 2 congressional districts are not decided yet, which leads to item I think might be number 1 in my We the People demand list, the SAVE Act that the left filibustered. I forget what SAVE acronym stands for, but has to do with voter integrity and voter ID. Now, states can generally control their elections, but the federal government has say in presidential years and congressional districts, and the Communists lost all battleground states. So this was a mandate election, but yet the House of Representatives still so close because of the gerrymandering after the last census the left was able to do. And we need to indeed be able to exert some authority that if they're either incompetent or just or willfully, purposefully, malice aforethought trying to cheat, they got to be fired. They've got to be removed. DeSantis did that with Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade was traditionally one of those cities, county areas that Florida couldn't report results for a month because they kept playing games in Miami-Dade. Florida cleaned up their laws. He fired everybody. Florida, this election, was one of the first to report results, but they're still counting in California.
Yeah, that's corruption at its finest, and I hate to put it that way, but that's all it is. That they're trying to steal seats in the House of Representatives so that maybe the Democrats can somehow gain a majority, but as of right now, the Republicans have a small majority in the House of Representatives, but the Democrats, they just want to get as many seats as possible because they know if they get a small enough majority, because this is the way it's been for a long time. Democrats, sometimes they might have scuffles, but in the end, they're all unified, saying, "Oh, we're as of right now, they're about destruction of America, wanting to make us into a new world order type government." And the Republicans,
they want one party rule like the CCP. They want, for all the Russian collusion talk, they are the ones that want what Putin has, one party rule, as in Russia and Iran and North Korea and China and other places. And you're absolutely right. Like the Senate, now part of it is we had some bad candidates, but over the last couple cycles, if Oz would have won in Pennsylvania, although he was a very bad candidate, still was singing the praises of Oprah as a great friend and a trusted advisor. Nope. Mike Rogers here in Michigan just lost. I was saying he was going to lose. A lot of people are saying, oh, there were shenanigans. Trump run the state. How did he lose? Well, he lost because a lot of Republicans consider him to be a deep state insider, rhino, and said in the primary, if he's the nominee, we won't vote for him. And lo and behold, he lost. Where anybody else from that primary, like I was backing Doc Sherry, any other candidate would have been able to easily ride Trump's coattails to the Senate seat. So we would have like 55 or 56 seats in the Senate now had we had better candidates or dealt with some of the fraud in the past, like Kerry Lake situation and whatnot, Dr. Oz, a couple other places, and have a chance for a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. You need 60 seats, maybe in 2026, but we pissed away that opportunity now. There's no way of getting 60 seats in the Senate anytime soon, and they're talking about eliminating the filibuster. Well, we're the ones that got to put a law in place protecting it because we preserve the foundations in our republic, whereas, like you said, they're trying to tear down all of those things.
Right, and that's what's really frustrating with this election result. I mean, I'm glad that Donald Trump became U.S. president, but I would have loved to have seen a much greater majority in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate, because there's still a lot of division in the Republican Party. You still have the rhino contingent, and you've got the freedom-loving Americans, like in the Freedom Caucus, for example, in the U.S. House of Representatives. That's about 30 members. But unfortunately, there's just not enough of those freedom-loving conservative-type politicians in our U.S. government, and that's why we need a much bigger majority to help us out getting laws passed. And that's why the Democrats are just trying to steal as many seats as possible, because they know that a lot of the rhinos can be bought off and paid and not getting any laws passed.
Especially in the day of Trump derangement syndrome, right? In the days of Reagan only had GOP control, putting on the GOP hat now, stepping aside from earnest, honest, and analyst, although this is earnest, honest analysis in here too. Reagan only had GOP control of the Senate for 2 of his 8 years, never the House. But back then, there was still such a thing as a conservative Democrat, and he was able to get a lot of his agenda accomplished, but not all of it. Imagine how well off we'd be now. We wouldn't be further down this road as we are had Reagan been able to get everything accomplished, eliminating the Department of Education then, right after it was illegally, unconstitutionally created, and our education has gotten worse every single decade since it was created. It needs to return to the state. So indeed, in We the People Demand list, dismantling Department of Education, return to states' rights and parental rights is in the list. Another thing, school choice, right? Our elites send their kids to private college, but want to trap your kids in the indoctrination factories. That's in the list. I know that's something you agree with too, right?
Oh, yeah. The public schools have gotten way out of control with their critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and stuffing all this progressive ideology down the kids' throats. That there needs to be a Judeo-Christian form of education in this country, because that's what we were formed on back in 1776. not all of the founding fathers were devout Christians, but they believed in the Christian method for education, and that's why that there needs to be a biblical focus now in education to get to be able to create much better citizens out of kids as they go into adulthood, because there are just too many teenagers right now in the U.S. who aren't prepared to deal with the real world, and that they just don't know what it's like to face how to handle disappointment. Unfortunately, it's all about it. It seems to be what the minds of U.S. teenagers. If they don't get their way, they just cry until they get their way. But they have to realize that life isn't always fair. You're going to get some things you want, and sometimes you're not.
Right. You in this country are not guaranteed an outcome. You're guaranteed an opportunity to make of yourself. You touched on a few things there. They took civics out of the school, so they don't understand how government works. I have, as part of We the People Demand List, not just defunding PBS and NPR. There's no use for them anymore. Private corporations are licensed by the FCC, cover all of America now. There's no sense in funding those two organizations anymore. They can survive on pure donation or running ads like everybody else. And part of that I have, I'm just a bill. Bring back Schoolhouse Rock. Because civics isn't in school, they don't know anything. History was removed for social studies, social engineering, not justice, but engineering. Like, we don't teach the Commie Compact, Bradford Colony. We know the Mayflower Compact, but it was a Commonwealth communist compact before Marx ever came along and outlined it, and it failed here on our own continent like it fails everywhere, because eventually it's human nature. Jesus said the poor will always be among you. That's not an economic statement. That's not a governance statement. That's a human nature statement. And if you allow people to get equal shares of everything while putting in less and less work for it, eventually there's more in the cart that can pull the cart. And we don't teach that in school. In fact, the opposite, we're promoting communism, because community that the U.S. is built on is biblical. Free will. We are to want to be our brother's keeper, versus communism, which is force and theft. Big difference.
Right. Yeah. And then in the Bible that I've always heard, I've never found this verse in the Bible before, but I've always been a big supporter of this phrase: God helps those who help themselves. and that's what kids really need to be taught, American kids. If you help yourself, then you're going to be able to achieve maybe substantial wealth. If not, you'll be able to afford a decent sized home and have the American dream with a White House and a picket fence like it that used to be the case back in before, well, basically up to Ronald Reagan's term as president of the U.S., and then it kind of fell off the wayside a little bit since then. But that's really what there needs to be, that work ethic that needs to be instilled back into young Americans, because now because we got to get back to in the military being to smash, burn, and kill. That's what the military is there for, not to be able to just say, oh, my feelings are hurt because you offended me. It's all about you protect us you volunteer to protect your fellow Americans from the enemies around the world, mainly radical Islam or Boko Haram. Name any terrorist organization you want around the world. And unfortunately that's just not the case right now. And if that message that God helping those who help themselves, if that's preached to young kids, it certainly will bode well for a better and brighter future. And we can get back to being able to, let's say, if we do disagree on political issues, we can be civil about it like we used to be before the Vietnam War.
Yeah. Now, you paraphrased a scripture, and there is indeed also a scripture directly relating between community and communism. I should memorize which book and scripture it is, but I haven't. There's a distinction. Those who do not work shall not eat, right? That's a direct reference, right? If there's a difference between, like, I am on disability, I've paid into a system that then helps me as an entitlement now that I cannot work. There is a difference and a distinction between the unwilling to work and those who are unable to work. And you mentioned DEI before. Of course, there's an entry in We the People Demand List on that. And the left, inclusion is not a four-letter word when applied properly. The left, like many things, bastardized it. Same thing with diversity. Not a four-letter word if applied properly versus the leftism, wokeism, warping of it. E pluribus unum, from many one. We are the most diverse and inclusive nation on the planet. It's right there on our coinage and everything. E pluribus unum, yes, from many one. We are diverse and inclusive, and they ignore that.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Podcast fans, get more about your favorite podcasts via deepcast.fm, transcripts, and all kinds of extra available information on your favorite podcasts, including ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, is listed at deepcast.fm, as well as, are you a podcaster? Well, you can claim your free listing and more via Deepcast Pro. Check out tinyurl.com/DeepcastPro for podcasters for your free listing, and that's the number 4 in there. tinyurl.com/DeepcastPro for podcasters, the number 4, Deepcast Pro, the number 4 podcasters via tinyurl.com extension. Take care, all. You gotta check them out. Get more out of your podcast, whether you're the podcaster or the podcastee. Yeah, I think I just invented that word.
Right. And our country was founded on immigration for the most part. I mean, yes, there were Native Americans who inhabited the U.S. back before the United States became a country, but it was those who came from European nations and docked at Ellis Island in New York who came here to get a better life.
Legally.
Legally. and there were many different creeds and ethnicities that came along. You had the Polish, the Germans, the Irish, the Czechs, well, probably not so much in the 1700s. But I mean,
we follow you.
You get the point. There it was very diverse backgrounds that came to America, and that's why we became known as the melting pot society, because
ding.
I mean, it's simple as that. To all those politicians who say we discriminate, well, they need to go back and look at what those who came here, our ancestors, when they docked at Ellis Island, they came here for a better opportunity.
Right, and that's the key again. Opportunity, not a guaranteed outcome. And it's everything bad from Trail of Tears on has been perpetrated by a left commie-fascist sociocrat administration. Trail of Tears, slavery, the Civil War over it, segregation. It is the DEI crowd that wants supposed inclusion, again peddling segregation. They are peddling exactly opposite what they claim to be wanting, right? Segregation of black-only dorms and black-only and or women-only this, and Title IX aside, because we all understand on the right the differences in the genders, the real genders, the two genders, not the umpteen million made-up ones, right? But that aside, the equality and indeed the melting pot. But again, black only this or black only that or female only this and female only this or special rights of trans whatever this or that or the other thing is a bastardization of the melting pot and e pluribus unum and the diversity inclusion that they pretend they're for, but yet they're peddling segregation.
Right. Yeah. And it's the Democrat Party is the party of feelings, that they just don't have anything concrete to run on. The Republican side now with Donald Trump, they're all about, they've got strong policies now. They want a border wall. They want security. They want illegal immigrants thrown out. And if you do immigrate to our country, you've got to go through a background check before you're allowed to become a legal U.S. citizen. And we still have Second Amendment rights under the Republican Party, although I wish they would just look at the laws that have been passed by the Democrat states prohibiting certain gun usage, because the Second Amendment says it shall not be infringed. So you can't be having gun-free zones and having restrictions on ammo or any type of gun.
Oh, there's some. Yeah, I'm on about that all the time. They aren't gun-free zones. What they are slaughter zones, right?
Right.
More killing happens there than anywhere else because those who want to do evil know people can't defend themselves there. They can slaughter more people before the cops can show up with guns to then stop them. I was going to say something else, but I forgot now since you went off on that. But I know you've got somewhere you've got to be shortly, and I try to avoid running these shows long. So I do, after the new year, hope to have you back for sports exclusively. But tell everybody again where to find you and when.
My name is Derek Stone. I'm the host of the Stone Cold Sports Truth here on WAAM Talk 1600 and also 92.7 FM. My program is heard every Sunday afternoon from 12:30 to 1, and you can also hear it on whamradio.com.
You know what? Thank you, Lord. I got reminded from above, I think. What is also actually in the Bible, heaven has a gate. If it's good enough for heaven that you must come through the front door, I think it's good policy for us too, yes?
Right. Yeah, and that's why I support the border wall at the U.S.-Mexico border. And I want all of the illegal migrants to not be coming into the U.S. and possibly bringing their mob-like mentality, their criminal-like behavior, or any third world diseases they might be carrying, because we are an exceptional nation, and I wanted to stay that way.
Yep. Amen, brother. I hear you. All right. Well, thank you, Derek, for joining me today. I appreciate you coming by.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Joe.
And again, for behind the scenes video watchers, this looks weird because we're doing it on Skype. We had some Zoom problems. So I'm sure I'll talk to you again next Sunday on your show, talking about hopefully another Lions win today over the Colts. And as I spoke with you on your show, I'm worried about Thanksgiving because when you're the home team, you've got all the trappings of the holiday and family matters, whereas the opponents come in, they're in a hotel, they're strictly focusing on the game. That's why the Lions have a dismal record on Thanksgiving.
Oh, well, I think that has a lot to do with just the curse of the Ford family for the most part, since they bought the team in 1964. But now with Sheila Hamp, who is the daughter of William Clay Ford Sr. and Martha Firestone Ford, she's done an excellent job in turning around the franchise. I didn't think it was at all possible with anybody from the Ford family, but she's done great. I was a little skeptical about Dan Campbell as the head coach because he wasn't an offensive or defensive coordinator before he became a head coach, but gosh, he's proved me wrong, and I'm certainly proud of him proving me wrong.
Yeah, I was ambivalent when he came out. I thought, it'll be another Wayne Fonts. It'll be another, the same old. I hashtag long ago and always used Ford ownership curse and hashtag sell the team. But hopefully, indeed, it is a new era now. All right, I'll talk to you next Saturday, or Sunday rather, brother. God bless.
Right. Yep. Thank you.
Podcast fans, get more about your favorite podcasts via deepcast.fm, transcripts, and all kinds of extra available information on your favorite podcast, including ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, is listed at deepcast.fm, as well as, are you a podcaster? Well, you can claim your free listing and more via Deepcast Pro. Check out tinyurl.com/DeepcastPro for podcasters for your free listing, and that's the number 4 in there. tinyurl.com/DeepcastPro for podcasters, the number 4. Deepcast Pro, the number 4 podcasters via tinyurl.com extension. Take care, all. You gotta check them out. Get more out of your podcast, whether you're the podcaster or the podcastee. Yeah, I think I just invented that word. Thank you for having tuned in for ChristiTutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via terrorstrikes.info/shop. Be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come, but for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.